All right, folks, welcome back to to me. Welcome back to me. Yes, sorry about that. I just got distracted. Um Now today, or now, we're going to talk a little bit more about agile methodologies for software development, and there will be a little bit of repetition for you guys. We've heard this before, but I just want to reemphasize that repetition is the mother of our learning. And when I talk about these things now, you will have a greater understanding of the terminology, what we are talking about, why we're talking about these issues, and then I'm going to move a little further in and talk a little bit than before and talk about some misconceptions perhaps, and perhaps we can have a little bit of a Q&A. And I want you, when we talk about this now, to reflect on this subject from a perspective of your experiences with coding and working on projects, even though they have been very small projects yet. You know how that applies to your everyday life, or the new normal that you experience as developers. And again, we are streaming this on Twitch, which means that I will be uploading this to YouTube and sending out the recording to you guys from that. So there will be no recording of this session directly. Make sure you follow that along. If you get any quality issues on the Google Meet, you probably are better off on Twitch. And I see that Luke is there. Thank you very much, Luke, for that. Anyway, working agile with Scrum and XP, and XP is of course an abbreviation for, anybody know what that stands for?
I want to say experience, but
yes, experience points. That's from Dungeons and Dragons. We've all been
Maybe
there.
Windows XP.
We could be Windows XP, but it isn't. Anybody else? Well, if you know, you can say. Extreme programming, says Jura in the background there. Jura is not even in the Hangout, but he could answer the question. Extra points to Jura. XP stands for extreme programming, people. It sounds hardcore, and in a way, it is. Oh, you are there. Okay, Jura. Good to see you. Right. Let's see if we can get any smarter. Okay, guys. Let's see if I can work my way through this presentation, and perhaps at the end of the road we might be a bit wiser than we were before. There will be no coding involved in this session. It's all talk. And I wish I had a glass of water, and I'm saying it loud because I know that Jura hears me, because there will be a lot of talking going on. Thank you. It's in flask or glass. Tack så mycket, kompis. Yeah, everybody is so nice to me. Or perhaps I'm just manipulating them. I don't know. Anyhow, changing practices is one thing. Changing minds is quite another. And why do I have a quote like this here? Well, because we can change the way you guys work and think about, coding and all of that stuff. But what we are really looking for, to be honest, is to change your approach to how to build things and how to code and so on. Because at the end of the day, we are out to build complex things and do that professionally, and with everything that comes with it. And if you are stuck in a predefined way of thinking, then you probably will not achieve as much as I would like you guys to achieve at the end of this journey with us, and also in your careers. So this guy Mike Kahn, that coined this quote or this expression, he's one of the founders, one of the signees of a thing that we will be discussing today, which is the Agile Manifesto. And he's a smart guy, smarter than me. Perhaps not as smart as you guys, but definitely smarter than me. So I just want to throw out a lot of terminology on the screen, right? So, priorities, user stories, sprint, Scrum, Agile, business values, all of this weird stuff that we have to take into consideration, right? Increments, requirements, retrospectives, and so on. These are terms that we use on an everyday basis when we work, and my job is to bring more clarity to what some of these things mean. Your job is to start using these expressions and start not only talking about them but actually practicing them one way or another. But there's a lot of lingo that we need to acquaint ourselves with, and behind that lingo comes, of course, a lot of practices, way of thinking, philosophies, and so on, right? And let's see if we can settle for a few things. So what I will do today now during this hour that we have ahead of us is to tell you more about the Agile Manifesto and what Agile is in this context of software development or building information systems. We're gonna start by talking about Agile in general, and then dive into an Agile framework that is called Scrum. I will also touch upon extreme programming, which is nothing new under the sun. It's been around for many, many years, but it comes with a set of practices and to-dos that allows us to be efficient and professional and effective in our work. So that's a good combo. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the common misconceptions or myths around this agile methodology, and how we what people say should be practiced or is practiced, and all of that stuff, right? So that will come at the end of this presentation. Now let's just figure out what agile is, because there's a lot of misconceptions, as I already said, and we will address some of them at the end, but we need to set the ground floor, or the baseline, and define what agile is. It's one of many forms of software development methodologies, right? So it's one way to work in developing software. It has been designed to deal with complex IT systems, okay? And the main focus of this agile approach is to make sure that the clients, the people who actually are going to use our system, or at least pay for us building those systems, that they are satisfied with our work, that they get what they came for, and that their requirements are being met. And we do that by continuous delivery of software, by constantly limiting the project scope to only do what needs to be done, and do that in small increments, and always verify that we are on the right track. I will explain that in more detail later on. But generally speaking, you can say that an agile project sets a minimum number of requirements and has as a main goal to turn those requirements into working software, deliverable product. And that might sound a bit abstract, perhaps, or, as we say in Swedish, flummigt. I don't know what the appropriate word in English is for that. Vague, or I don't know, could be. But hopefully we can hammer out what it actually means in practical terms. Right. So back in 2001, which is like a eternity ago, a bunch of guys, and there were exclusively guys actually. I don't think there was a single woman in there. Got together and thought that they could save the world, which is a very manly thing to think, right? We have all the answers. I will not beat on these guys. These are very, very professional, very talented software developers, and they all felt a frustration that a lot of the projects that they were involved in didn't really met the requirements. They went overboard, or didn't deliver what they were supposed to deliver. And back then, in the late 90s, in the beginning of 2000, there was this report released by Gartner Group. I don't really have the link to that report, but I can find it for you at some point, that stated that almost 70% of all IT projects went either over budget heavily, they were abandoned for one reason or another, or they simply didn't deliver what the customers wanted from in the first place. 70% of all IT projects went to shit, one way or another. Now imagine if you would transfer those numbers into any other industry. Let's take public transportation. If 70% of all buses and trams simply didn't arrive on time or didn't arrive at all, then people wouldn't be that happy. If 70% of all the buildings that we build or bridges that we construct or whatever wouldn't be finished, that would not work, right? It would be chaos. It would be like Soviet Union back in the days, right? That wouldn't fly. I'm kidding. But it's like it's not possible. Yet in the IT industry, that was the reality. There was a lot of problems. Yes, West traffic could be a part of that statistics sometimes. Now, so these guys got together over I don't know the story to be honest fully, but it was like a weekend conference, and they started to talk to each other, and they at the end of that conference they came up with this thing that they call the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, which has become a little bit of a beacon of light in this industry, because it kind of revolutionized the way we think about this the process of crafting software and delivering solutions. So in quite big terms, what they said is that they wrote that we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Through this work, we have come to value the following: individuals in interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. You've heard me talk about this before, that all of these things are actually really important, but while there is a value on the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. And this is the important part here, if you read this carefully, is that these guys didn't only talk about this in theoretical terms, but what they brought to the table was their own experience. And I think that the second line in the paragraph on top, when they say that they want to uncover better ways of developing software by actually doing it and helping others to do it, is very important to me, because these are not just professors and theoretical people that have a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts, but actually practitioners, and that I value that a lot. So they formulated this 2001, 20 years ago, is an ages in this context, but I would say that it still stands firmly and brings a lot of good things to our industry and what we do for a living. All of this is translated to multiple languages. I'm just putting up a Swedish version of the same manifesto on the same website. And the website looks like shit. I know it's that was way before CSS frameworks came around, I guess. These people they were not web developers apparently. Obviously, yeah, it looks like shit. But nonetheless, it's the content. It's not the packaging. If you want to read about this in your own languages, there are multiple versions of this. All right, so I cherry-picked a few things that I want to talk to you guys about that I think is really, really important. And again, this is the part where I want you to start thinking about your own experiences when you write code and when you learn things with us or on your own or whatever. Now, the main principle of Agile Manifesto, and the principles are the things attached to the manifesto, not the thing that I read out, because this is just the preamble. There are 12 principles attached to this Agile Manifesto, and I cherry-picked some of them. So the one that I really enjoy, or the three ones that are on top of my list, are these: that their highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. You know me, I like to read every word carefully and interpret that. I think that early and continuous delivery are the keywords here, and valuable software is also the keyword, right? So we do not build software for just building it for the sake of building it, but rather to solve a problem, to bring some value to the organization that is our customer, or pay our invoices. The second one is that deliver working software frequently, in time frames from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with a preference to the shorter time scale is also important. So deliver as often as possible with a lot of checkpoints, and make sure that you are on the right track, and that you are doing the right thing at all times. Also a very important one. And the last one, which is in my opinion, the most important one, is that working software and nothing else is the primary measure of progress. It doesn't really matter how much documentation you write, even it doesn't really matter how many tests you write or how high test coverage you have, if you're testing the wrong thing. And by working software, we mean that software that not only runs and runs bug-free, but actually solves a problem, that it does the job that it sets out to do. See, I never care about animations or spinning logos or whatever, even though I do recognize that user interfaces or engaging using interfaces are important. I am always focused on getting the job done, that the right data is available at the right point, and is being processed in the right manner. These are the principles that I think are the most important ones, personally. Now, there is a reason why we employ agile methodologies in the context of learning. I think that's really important to mention early on, because every learning situation is a situation that transforms people, from one state to another, brings new ideas, new workflows, and so on. And the agile approach is an approach that truly embraces change. And in those principles, the signers of the manifesto stated that they want to welcome changing requirements even late in the development process, and that agile processes actually harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. So always be oriented toward change. And we always say that change is the only constant, and for many developers and in many projects, change requirements can be perceived as an obstacle, saying that, oh no, now we have to rework stuff and so on. Here in this way of thinking, we actually we drive change. Not only do we welcome it, but we also actually drive it in order to produce better solutions and better software for our clients. And why? Because we want to enhance, or we want to help to drive their competitive advantage at all times, and that is really important. That is what makes us professional. It is also a business-oriented approach. One of the principles states that business people, representatives from the client, the domain experts, needs to work with developers daily throughout the entire project, so that the communication between the people that will use the system is constantly floating between the guys or the teams that are actually building those solutions. But then there is another dimension of the whole thing, which I really like, and that is that the agile approach is a people-oriented one, in my opinion. So the manifesto states that we should build teams or build projects around motivated individuals, and that we should make sure that we give them the environment and support they need, and then trust that they will get the job done. people are not seen just like resources for production, but actually for the main force of innovation and entrepreneurship and drive. They also talk about that the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. We have to put this statement in its context, in the time where it originates from. Back in 2001, the things that we are doing today, video conferencing using our personal computers, or even streaming live sessions like we do on Twitch, was simply unthinkable. That didn't exist 20 years ago. And I would definitely say that synchronous communication, like talking to each other and communicating, is the best way to convey information. But today we can do that with over long distances, with telecommunication or video conferencing and so on. So that works pretty good. Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, all the stakeholders, the sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. And why do we talk about indefinitely in this context? You know, a project by definition has a start, a set of deliveries, and then a finish. They are usually time framed. Well, that's the case, but I would also argue that a project, a software development project, is never really finished, because once you have developed all the main features, there is of course a maintenance mode, there is also fine-tuning, bug fixing, and so on, right? So even though the pace of development could go down and you don't do as much work, or you can scale down the team working on a project, but there should always be, as long as the system is used by somebody, there will be a need for a development team to look at it and do something with that. And you want to avoid, you know, hectic sprints and massive panic, fixes or just rushing to do things, because it's not sustainable in the long run. You want to work in a good pace, with afterthought, with analysis, with constant checkpoints, validations, and so on, so that you build the right thing at the right time. And then the thing that is, most obviously related to education and learning, and that is that built into the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Methodologies is the need for constant growth and redefining of processes, and of course keeping up with changes in technology and so on. Now, in the manifesto, the signees of that document said that continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances our ability to work in an agile way. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is also essential. Prioritizing, eliminating waste, not spending valuable time and resources on things that will not bring good value to the project. But also the things that I really like with the agile approach is the aspect of empowerment. This principle that states that the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams is something that appeals to me a lot. Which also is something that comes back in other parts of this document, where you build project teams around motivated people, and you trust them that they will get the job done. And self-organization is one way of looking at this, where you can build a team, let's say 6 people like you guys, with different talents and different experiences. Somebody is good at the back end, somebody else is more focused on front-end design or what have you, right? And together you can build a team that can get a lot of things done, rather than doing things alone and having to know everything by yourself. But also it is better for a team to organize themselves and figure out the best way for them to function than a boss to just come in and say, you do this and you do that and so on, right? I truly believe that self-organizing teams are the best way to promote professionalism and efficiency. And those teams, which is another principle, should at regular intervals meet and reflect on how to become more effective and question pretty much everything that we do, and then tune and adjust the processes and the behavior within the team accordingly. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, okay, we tried this over a course of a week, 2 weeks, a month or something. It doesn't really work. Let's try something else, right? That's a strength in itself, in my opinion. That's a very good approach to life. And so this reflective part that I know that we've spoke many times about many times in this context of the bootcamp and learning how to code is really, really important. Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing it at the right time? Can we fine tune and adjust a little bit moving forward? Now, you've seen this probably. I stole it from the internet, probably drawn by Bob Hartman, whoever that is. Not sure. I knew at some point, forgot it now. This representation is kind of cool. I like those visuals. There is a difference between having an agile mindset and practicing agile methodologies, right? One of the main principles is this, in the beginning of the Agile Manifesto, they speak about people or individuals and interactions over processes and tools, right? But again, we're not saying that we don't like processes and tools. We're just saying that we value individual and the interactions between those individuals more. Now, in order to do anything that is complex, we need a set of rules, and we need some protocols, some checkpoints, and so on, right? And of course, in this agile world, we also have rules. It's not a chaos thing that everybody just does whatever they want to do. We do have certain principles that we need to follow in order to make sure that we act professionally at all levels. And that would be, in my opinion, doing agile, right? So you follow those rules and those principles, but you also need to have an agile mindset, which is like, that should encapsulate all those principles one way or another. And those two approaches, they need to coexist, in my opinion. You can't just be this free soul that, oh, I'm very flexible, I just react to change and I do this and that without any plan. You need to have some structure altogether, but balance those things out. And which brings us to those principles and those rules, which is Scrum, for instance, right? Scrum is something that we practice here at Craft Academy, and we do that in the context of developing new software and so on, but also in the context of learning and teaching, actually. So Scrum is one of many agile frameworks that helps us to complete complex projects. Another one that is worth mentioning is called Kanban. We will talk about Kanban in this bootcamp as well later on. But for now, let's focus on Scrum. Now, Scrum is considered fairly simple, but it's not easy to practice. It doesn't involve too many things, but in everyday use, it could be a bit intimidating and hard to follow. It's built around roles, artifacts, and time boxes. The roles include Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the Scrum Team, which is a different different way of saying Scrum Team is the development team. The Product Owner is the client. Scrum Master is not per se defined by Agile. It's a Scrum thing. And then you have to-do lists, which is the product backlog. We have a sprint backlog and something that is referred to as burn down chart, which is, by the way, a very funny aspect of the Silicon Valley show. There is this character called Jared that loves to track all aspects of the work being done. In this, when you look at Silicon Valley, you will understand that Jared, I think his name is Jared. He's all into agile practices. He's not very flexible, so he doesn't balance this out. But watch the show and you will understand what I mean. And then time boxes. Everything in Scrum is time boxed. We will look at that. For instance, there's a set of meetings. Sounds like a lot, but it's actually not so much if you compare to other project management systems or frameworks. In professional settings, not in an educational setting, you can say that whenever you plan a sprint, we will talk about sprints in a second, you spend a certain amount of time, 8 hours max, and so on. So we need to time box everything, because at the end of the day, we want to spend as little time as possible in meetings and more time on actually building stuff. But we also acknowledge that you have to have meetings because you have to know what to work on, right? So we can't eliminate meetings altogether. So that's important. All right. So everything is time boxed, and we have the product backlog, which calls for an explanation. Product backlog is basically a wish list, a to-do list with all the possible requirements that you might come up for a specific system or part of the system. And then you have something called a sprint backlog, which is basically a subset, a part of this product backlog, the larger wish list, that is well defined, prioritized, and set, like marked to be worked on in a specific sprint. And then you have this famous or infamous burned out chart, which is basically a representation of how much work has been done by the development team, which is something that we actually do not use during the bootcamp because we work in such a short sprint. So that would be just create an unnecessary overhead. We don't want to do that. So I know you've heard this. There's going to be a lot of words. I probably need to take a sip of water. But in principle, and pay attention now, we'll try to highlight the important things in bold fonts. But if you have a product owner, which is the client, right? Let me see if we can get this done in 30 seconds. So a client creates a prioritized wish list. We call this a product backlog. And during a sprint planning meeting, the team pulls a small chunk from the top of that wish list, a sprint backlog, and decides how to implement those pieces. The team has a certain amount of time, referred to as a sprint, which is usually 2 to 4 weeks to complete its work, but it meets each day to assess the progress. We called it a daily scrum. Along the way, the Scrum Master keeps the team focused and on its goal. At the end of the sprint, the work should be potentially shippable, ready to hand over to the customer, put on a store shelf, or whatever. The sprint ends with a sprint review and a sprint retrospective, and as the next sprint begins, the team chooses another chunk of the product backlog and begins working again, and that is done in a sprint planning. And we just cycle this through over and over again. So we take a small part of the product backlog and we work on it, and then we take another one and work on it, and take another one and work on it. And in the meantime, we just meet regularly with the client and say, look, this is what we built. Is this okay? Yes, it is, he says, or she said. Or they say, no, actually, you know what? This sucks. This was not at all what I imagined. And so it's better to figure out that you worked on something that wasn't relevant early on in the process, rather than having like 2, 3, 4, 5 months to pass before the client goes in and says, the fuck is this? This wasn't at all what I imagined. Do you understand? So small sprints, small iterations, and constant communication. This is what we're looking at here. Does that make sense? Right. Yeah. And if we look at the same thing from a graphical perspective, we could look at this way. You have a product backlog that is created with the input of the product owner, which is a representative of the client. He knows the deal. He knows the business that is supposed to be helped by our software. We have the team. The team selects the starting point in a sprint planning meeting. We say this sprint we will work on this, and that. And we create a sprint backlog. And then we have this sprints, which is like 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, predefined. We have to agree upon that with the client and among ourselves. The Scrum Master is like an outsider, to be honest. His or her job is to make sure that everybody in the team is happy. Hey, my computer broke. I fix it. I need another update of my IDE. I'll fix that. Or I'm going to be sick for the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to let my colleagues down. Well, I take in an intern, an extra resource for that. These are the people that take care of the nitty-gritty stuff, the stuff that the team needs to not worry about anything, but actually work on the task at hand, right? The things that we set out to do. Oh, well, thank you, Anya, for the raid. Right, we're talking agile and stuff, so hopefully you guys enjoy that. 49 people, that's a lot of folks. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So we are looking into taking the sprint backlog and working our way through it. If it's a short sprint, perhaps we only have 3, 4, 5 features that we will be working on. Those features are predefined. They have the user stories. They have something that we refer to as acceptance criteria or definition of done, which is basically a preset condition of when can we say that this is actually finished. Because we all know that once you start to build something and you start to code, you come up with new ideas, you come up with new insights, and you can just come up with like a lot of other things that could be done. But once you've started to work on something, you shouldn't actually modify that feature, but rather create new ones to be worked on in a different sprint, and not alter your work that you already started, right? So we want to make sure that we stick to the plan, which is really important to understand. We need to stick to the plan. The critics say that Agile is anti-planning. I will address that in a while. And we work with the daily stand-up meetings just to make sure that we're on the right track, and that we have prioritized the right thing, didn't run into unnecessary blockers or obstacles and stuff like that. So that's also an important thing. And then at the end of the sprint, whether it was 1 week, 2 weeks, or 4, we need to have something that works, right? We can go to the client and say, look, our effort during this sprint resulted in this, and you can demo the project and those features that you set out to build. And that is the principle, that working software is the primary measurement of success. You don't really want to go to the client and said, yeah, we had great fun, made great progress during this sprint, but you know what, nothing really works. We're kind of done, or done soon enough, but not really yet, or the famous or infamous, it works on localhost, but it doesn't work in production, and all of that bullshit that people can say from time to time, right? So we want to have working software, something to show off to our client, I mean. And so we do that in a sprint review. We sit down with the client and we say, okay, this is what we set out to do, this is what you wanted that we agreed upon, and this is the end result of that. And they hopefully accept that, or they don't. You have a communication discussion with them. And another meeting that we mentioned before is the sprint retrospective, where the team sits down and says, hey, this went pretty well. Those 4 weeks were really productive, in the best case, in the best scenario. Or you guys sit down and say, you know what, this sprint sucked big time. We ran into issues. This didn't work. That didn't work. The communication didn't flow too well, and so on and so forth. And then you just say, what can we do to avoid that happening in the next sprint, right? so that the retro is not only for looking back, but also for looking forward and saying that, okay, next time, next sprint, we want to do things in a slightly different way so we can actually achieve better results and satisfy our clients' needs in a better way. So this, which is a lot of text, a lot of words, a lot of terminology, a lot of moving parts, could be represented in this graphical way, which still includes a lot of things. But if you break everything down into smaller pieces, it's just logical. You have a to-do list. It needs to be. You can't work on everything. You have to prioritize. You take a chunk of that to-do list and you work on it for a fixed period of time. And at the end of that period, you ship something off to the client and can brag about it. Hey, look, here's what we've done. And then you just sit down, talk to each other, and figure out, can we do something better next time around? Does all of this make sense, people?
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yep.
Good stuff. All right. So let's see if what else do we have? Well, I promised you to tell you a little bit about XP. So XP stands for Extreme Programming, and that sounds hardcore. First time I heard about this, I was like, yeah, that's going to be me. I want to be an extreme programmer. Now, the thing with XP is that it's a set of best practices and ways and things that you can do as an individual developer, but most importantly as a member of a team that could put you in a state of hyper productivity, right? That things that just you are in a flow. We've all been in a flow at some point, right? Whether it's in programming or in anything we do, like you just do stuff and it just works and it feels fantastic, right? And if you do it yourself, that's great. But if you can get into that flow with others, you can build, an enormous power, like a small streams that can form a current that just moves forward and just delivers, right? And that's a pretty awesome feeling. Now, in order to be able to achieve that momentum, one would, in my opinion, want to employ as many best practices as possible, things that other people have tried and defined and redefined sometimes, and that works for them, and make them your own. And so XP, in my opinion, supplements Scrum, which is more about why we do, how we do things, like in planning, and gives us an overall structure of this flow of working on projects. But here we are down to the daily routines and actually writing code or crafting software together. And the things that extreme programming defines for us is, for instance, behavior-driven design, the approach to software development from a user perspective, this outside-in approach where you focus on the end users, interaction with the system that you're building, and the value that the user will achieve from that. And together with test-driven development, those two create a practice of actually building features and parts of the system that really focus on value, on the interaction and the best output for the user. It puts the user in the center of development. XP also talks a lot about pair programming, and I think that even early on in this journey that we undertake together, guys, you can probably acknowledge that pair programming is better than solo programming. You do fewer mistakes. It's not as lonely, as coding solo. You come up with better solutions to complex problems. There's so many things that comes out of pair programming that you just simply won't get if you work totally in isolation. And I'm not saying that pair programming needs to be practiced every day, every hour of the day in your professional life, but definitely as a practice that is the default, where you sometimes break out of this and work solo on tedious work or some config work, for instance, and so on, right? XP also talk about automated testing, which is, in my opinion, the most important principle here, right? Like you want to make sure that your code actually does what it's supposed to do, and that your applications actually behave the way you want them to behave. And there, I've been talking about automated testing with you guys many times around. I already introduced you to some of that domain, but it's really an integrated part of the extreme programming set of best practices. We talk about code reviews and refactoring, for instance, and in practice that. So refactoring calls for an explanation, which is, refactoring is basically the practice of once you produced a piece of software, you should take another look at it and say, can I make this better? Can I extract some functionality? Can I avoid code repetition? Can I make sure that we follow the good naming standards and all of that stuff, right? So once it works, even though we say that working software is the primary measurement of success or progress, I would also say that once it works, you should question that. Does it really work in the best way? Is there anything that I can do to make it better? Can I make this better? Yes, exactly as one chatter states on Twitch. Usually we can always do things better. Code reviews is a practice that self-organizing teams should employ always, and you guys will practice that in the context of this bootcamp. Like once you've written some code, it should get peer review, right? Members of your team should take a look at it and give you valuable feedback on your code from all angles and perspectives. And that also calls or includes this idea of collective code ownership, where even if you haven't worked on a specific feature, you should understand how it works and how it was implemented and so on, because we want to make sure that everyone on the team understands how our software was built and in what way it functions, and like integrates together with the rest of the system. Which brings us to the other topics about continuous integration and also continuous deployment, which is an automated way to make sure that whatever you just coded on and the feature you defined and implemented doesn't break the entire system, right? So we have tools that allows us to run tests that make sure that the software is submitted for some like usage stress tests or what have you in production like environments, just to make sure that the quality of the merged code actually stands high. And continuous deployment is just us being lazy. No, it's just making sure that if all the checks go green, like if your code is of good quality, if everything works and all the tests are passing and it actually meets the requirements, it should be pushed out to production instantly, right? Not without anybody having to press a button or two or so on, right? And when I talk about continuous deployment with people, I sometimes bring up this Windows 95 or 98 or whatever release back in the 90s, where Microsoft were like working heavily, really hard on a new release of the operating system, and then they made a big deal out of releasing that, with fanfare and big parties and events and so on, right? Nowadays, if you think about software as a service, let's say a tool that we use every day, GitHub, right? That now the people at GitHub are deploying code multiple times a day, right? There is always, the teams that work on the GitHub platform consist of like 300-400 developers, I guess, and they all work in different teams, and they push up features constantly, and that those features go through the pipeline of various quality assurance checks, and within an hour or two, a feature that is submitted by a developer can be in production, pushed out to all the users of GitHub. and that it happens, multiple times a day. No fanfares, nothing. It just shows up for users. So the software as a service model has kind of revolutionized. No, we're not advertising the bootcamp. I'm just having a few students with me. So the software as a service model has revolutionized the way we push out software and bring new functionality to our users, and that is truly amazing. And that is also an XP practice, just to make sure that focus on the important thing. Do not do the manual stuff unless if you can automate that. So we automate deployment as much as possible. Right. So it's a great combo. We leverage the popularity of Scrum with the sound engineering practices of XP, and that is my personal go-to combo when I work with in projects and when I write software. And I think that we have another slide, which is basically an attempt to illustrate what iterative and incremental development really stands for. Now, if you think about, you can talk about this illustration from many angles and many perspectives, but like the top one is more focused on this more traditional engineer-driven approach to building a car, for instance, right? Whereas the bottom one is more focused on the user, where if you look at a car as a mean of transportation, and we can always argue whether this is a good illustration or not, you kind of fix or solve the problem that you set out to solve early on by delivering a skateboard or a bike or what have you, and then constantly having a discussion with the client whether you're on the right track or not. And at the end of the day, you have a customer that is truly happy when he gets his convertible, rather than this boring Volvo upstairs. I don't know. Again, this illustration is not 100% accurate in my opinion. You can always argue against that. But in principle, if in its purest form, by focusing on the user need and rather than on the process itself, you can get a better end result. Yeah. I'm probably going to revisit this one. An incremental and iterative way approach to software development. Working software quickly and early. It is good for us to have a constant communication flow with our end users because it is less costly to change requirements early on when doing big rewrites. We want to write software that is easy to test and debug, and we can do that in smaller iterations if we limit the scope on every feature. If you think about the process that I outlined with those sprints, our clients and customers can respond to each build sooner rather than later, which is a good thing. We lower the risk of delivery. We do not spend too much time on things that are not verified or validated, which leads to better risk management. And that is pretty much the essence of this workflow, in my opinion, at least. Now, let's talk about some misconceptions and myths, because if you Google Agile and if you talk to people in the industry, and you will hear as many positive reviews or thoughts about Agile methodologies as you would hear negative ones, right? And I'm prepared for that, and I totally understand a lot of these things, and I do consider myself a little bit of a Agile evangelist. I really enjoy this line, this way of working, because I've been fortunate enough to work in fantastic teams, and I've achieved this hyper productivity a few times in life, and it's truly a fantastic feeling, right? And a great professional achievement. But again, I do understand that there are problems with this way of working, and so I just wanted to outline a few of them. Now, there are people who are both pro-agile and anti-agile, let's say that, agile is being perceived by many as a silver bullet. It's going to fix all your problems. People are claiming that agile is anti-documentation or anti-planning, that it's undisciplined, that it requires a lot of rework, it's anti-architecture, and also the most important and most popular one, that it doesn't scale. You can't work on really big projects in agile. Well, let's address some of these things. So people who claim that agile is a silver bullet, for instance, right? Well, I can definitely say that you can fail as spectacularly on an agile project as you can on a project using any other frameworks or any other methodologies. And there is nothing inherently magical about this way. It still requires a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of work and dedication and so on. But I truly believe that you can that you can take your development team and your customers, enhance communication, and have them work as close together as possible. Give them what you need. Make sure that they have all the equipment, all the necessary information, all the requirements, and just get the fuck out of Dodge. And I think that people will do the best they can. I do not believe that people thrive on the, military discipline. You do this, you do that, and don't question everything, because that kills creativity and initiative and innovation. I truly believe in people, and perhaps I'm naive, but that's really what I believe in. But again, you can fuck up, of course. Agile is not a silver bullet in any way. People claim that Agile is anti-documentation, which is in a way kind of perhaps true, because we do not document things just for documentation, but just for the sake of it, right? I've been working in RUP, for instance, which is a project management process developed by Ericsson, I think, in Sweden, which relies heavily on documents. Like everything is about documentation. I think that the ratio between writing one line of code to documenting that line of code is like 1 to 5 or 6. So that's pretty tough. And we try to use documentation as a mean of communication and not just for existence in itself. But in Agile, we do work with estimates. We prioritize things. We document our findings. We have to argue why we prioritize certain things. We write a lot of user stories, the definition of done, the acceptance criteria, and so on, right? And if you practice extreme programming, then you could also argue that tests, your automated tests, are a form of documentation, and that will help people to gain understanding of what the project is about. So I would say definitely that Agile is not against documentation in any way. It's anti-planning. Well, that is simply not true. I've heard this, I've read blog posts about this and so on, and I just couldn't agree less. There is a lot of planning going on in Agile, but we use something that we call just enough upfront design or just enough upfront planning. Do not plan for things that you have no clue about, right? And if you look at many other project delivery and development methodologies, we try to plan for things that we have no clue about. We can't foresee them. We can't know anything about that. Nobody has a magic, bulb where you can foresee the future. Change is the only constant, and therefore we want to work in short sprint and feedback loops so that we can plan accordingly with that. But also, we do have daily stand-ups where we plan for the next upcoming 24 hours. We have bi-weekly or fortnight, or 4 weeks planning meetings, iteration meetings, and so on, right? Release plans that are longer than that. So there is a lot of planning going on in Agile, of course. All right, Agile is undisciplined. Fuck off. No way. I mean, you will. When we work together, you will hate me for all the discipline that I require of you as you coach or a project manager. You have to write tests in a specific, sequence. Test first, implementation later. You have to get feedback. code reviews, all of that stuff. You have to regularly ship software. You have to change and update your plan all the time. So, redefine things, and you have to deliver bad news early. So when something is not working, we have to know about that, and so on. So, is there lack of discipline? I would say absolutely not. On the contrary, and I think that the short feedback loop of Scrum or even Kanban later on is actually enhances discipline, because you can't hide in these kind of projects. In Roop, you can hide behind massive documentation. Oh, I have to write this progress report, and it's gonna take me 2 weeks. In Agile, you can't do it. You have your feature, you work on it, you pair program. You understand? So you have a second set of eyes that keeps you in check and keeping you honest. And your tests speak for themselves. If the tests fail, that means that your feature is not working. If your integration tests fail, then you fucked something else up, and so on, right? So there's a lot of discipline going on in Agile projects, definitely. And it requires a lot of rework. Yes, it does, as every other method. Okay, you will make decisions that are not 100% right, and you will also face change. Again, change is the only constant, and this also relates back to the first point that I made, that Agile is not a silver bullet. You will fail in some regards, in some aspects of every project, and because any creative work with a deadline faces the same challenges. Customers change their mind, the reality around us changes, and so on. People get sick. COVID pandemic appears suddenly, and the world spins around us, and we have to adjust, and that will impact our work one way or another. But there's another part of the rework that is actually positive, and that is, as a team, if you constantly reflect upon things, you get smarter and wiser for every sprint. And then all of a sudden you can say, you know what, guys, you remember the things that we did like 6-7 sprints ago? I know of a better way to do this. We should have done something different. And then you decide, you take it up with the client, with your product owner, and you decide to do a rework. And that's just a positive thing, because it leads to better quality at the end of the road. And that is a result of your agile mindset, because you constantly look backwards and you say, can we do this better? Is there anything that we can change in our flow, in the technology we use, and so on and so forth, right? So that is actually a positive thing, in my opinion. And of course, the last one, Agile doesn't scale. Well, yes, it does not. It scales like any other software delivery process, not very well. Building software, building information systems is complex. It's hard. It requires a lot from everyone involved, and there is no really good delivery process that can meet all those requirements. And the solution? Go agile on it. Scale things down. Lower the scope. Break things into smaller pieces. Instead of working on one large or massive project, break it up into smaller ones, and focus on that. Build teams that focus on one part of the system rather than the whole thing, for instance. So it is an agile principle to work in small iterations, small well-scoped projects. So just follow that principle, and even the most complex system will be manageable and will be able to be delivered at the end of the day. So, a lot of words, a lot of principles. We talked about Agile, its core principles. I showed you the basics of Scrum and how well it plays with the very sound principles of extreme programming. And hopefully I also could demystify some of the myths, or address some of the misconceptions about Agile in principle. I would strongly encourage you to read more. The manifesto for Agile software development is where it all originates from, so definitely take a look at that. The Scrum Guide is also a freely available publication from scrum.org, I think. Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland are the two of the guys that signed the manifesto, and they are monetizing on this. So, but at least this Scrum guide is free, so that's good. And Kent Beck, which is also one of the guys that wrote the manifesto, he has a book that is called Extreme Programming Explained. Could be purchased from Amazon.com. There is a lot of free or freely available materials about XP as well. So you can definitely look into that as well. I think that's pretty much what I had for you guys. Luke, what do you say? Did you learn anything today?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's coming from the slightly different background. It's quite an interesting concept to constantly be able to update things after you've delivered them, even after you've delivered them. Whereas I'm used to, oh, they're delivered now, that's it.
Yeah.
You can't really do much more after it. So it's really, really interesting. I really like it. This is more what I want to go towards than a very strict, should we say, this is what you do. You can't really sort of think outside the box kind of thing. So I'm looking forward to it.
I think that's the right way to go. Like, as a junior dev, perhaps you will just be handed a document, do this, do that. But at the end, you want to move toward a seat on the table. You want to be and actually talk to clients, think about this, think about that, twist, make decisions, and that will make the job much, much easier, much more interesting. That's what makes programming or software development into a creative endeavor rather than just, writing code kind of thing, so.
Yeah, I also had the fact that it's shorter meetings. I've come from a company where we've had 2-3 hour meetings. At the end of it, we've had to schedule another meeting to talk about what we talked about in the same meeting. So
yeah, love that.
I'd like to get away from that.
So sounds like Volvo to me, but yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of, right. Cool. Seva, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's all is very new to me. So it seems cool. I want to see how it goes. Yeah, but I like it more, how it sounds more than what we were doing like in science, because it seems more fun and it seems more like purposeful rather than just doing something for the sake of doing it, which is, I think, is the wrong way of approaching anything, really. So yeah.
Cool. Cool. Not being bound by too many rules, but actually being able to, again, be creative. That's the main purpose here, because I think that the best solutions comes out of that. Christer, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it seems like a good way to work. I never worked like this, but yeah, it seems good. I just wonder, like, most of the companies out there work like this, or?
That's a good question. A lot of companies in the software development industry do. Not everyone. There is this. Jeff Sutherland, when the guy behind the Scrum guide, he has a talk. I can find it on YouTube. He talks about Scrum butt, where butt is probably a travesty of ass, but that comes from. So do you practice Scrum? Yeah, we practice Scrum, but we don't do this and that. So Scrum but, yeah, Scrum yes, but, and then we remove this and that and so on, right? So if you look at it, it's another topic altogether. But there's like so many variants of Scrum or Agile methodologies that, we need to tweak this for the human resource or for marketing or for large scale or organizations. From, like, I think SAFe is one variant. I read through those specs at some point, and it wasn't anything new under the sun. It was like a tweaked way of using Scrum or Agile, but like around everything else, there is this monetization issue, right? People need to make money out of something, right? So we have a bunch of charlatans running around in the industry claiming that they are agile coaches, which are usually not really involved in actual production. They don't have practical experience from actually working on agile projects and writing code and delivering software, but they've been the theoretical guys, the thinkers, right? The guys that point with their whole palm and say this and that, right? And I despise these kind of people, to be honest, because they just talk and talk about things that they have no clue about. I can safely say, you don't have to believe anything of what I just said. You should think for yourself. But I have practical experience of working in projects, and as I think, I think it came across that I like this way of doing things, but it's not a silver bullet. It's not a solution to every problem, right? But to get back to your question, yes, agile methodologies in one way or another are very widely spread. In the startup domain, we call it lean, which is a different approach to business development in a very agile way. So lean and agile play very well hand in hand if you look at that from that perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Sounds good.
Cool. But I just want to address another thing that that I thought about when you started to talk, like this way of like self-organizing teams, for instance, is a concept that is very, very foreign to a lot of people. What do you mean self-organizing? I want my boss to tell me what I'm gonna do, because if he doesn't tell me what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna stay home and watch Netflix, right? But I totally appreciate that, but I think that if we are really interested in the work we are supposed to do, then and we are giving a chance to self-organize, to really coexist and collaborate with our colleagues, then we actually do more than what we would have done if just being told by somebody to do something, right? So self-organization is a concept that is not easy to get into and understand on, and how can I practice this until you actually have been there and practice that. And hopefully we get a chance to do that together. All right, David, your thoughts?
Yes, that's interesting actually. And I have a question: is agile way of working? Is it like as the architects do? I mean, the IT architects. Is it like they organize everything, they put everything at what they will do, and just like organized thing,
Well, so to that I can say that
or I got it like a bit.
No, well,
depends on the architect.
Once again, Lucas.
Depends on the architect, I guess.
It could definitely depend on the architect himself, right, or herself. I would say that this covers all aspects of the process, right? It's
okay, the whole
DevOps, architecture, implementation, testing, and so on, right? So definitely, like the self-organizing team, it should have many talents, because the sum of its members, brings out synergies, right? This very famous 1 + 1 = 3 synergy BS, right? But it's actually true in this case. It's like if we bring together people from different backgrounds with different focus and different experiences, the sum of their total experience will create something that is unique. All right, does that make sense, David?
I got it. Yeah, I got it.
Cool. Arun, your thoughts?
Yeah, it is very interesting, and if I can say it's like maybe I got it or not. Like an example, I worked with in a hotel industry. When your customer come to you and to like book a banquet for the wedding party, like the customer tells you what he wants. He wants you to, it's like what kind of decoration does he want, what kind of flowers does he want, and how he want to organize the party, how many guests will come, and every details he gives you, and then how many rooms he will have in the hotel. And then, you know, the two managers, like one take care of the hotel rooms and the one decide the menu, and then you go to the chef and you design everything. All the team works together. So then you organize a party. It's not like someone came and he said, like, I want to do my marriage here and this is what I want. But you are working behind it. You are coordinating with all the team, and you are contacting the front desk manager, asking how many rooms are we ready for the guest or not, when they will come in evening, and the same way for the chef, like how much time will you take to prepare these dishes, and like this much guest we have, what do you need? So you work in the same way. So it seems like a little familiar to me in that manner.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. No, I can definitely see that. That's a good comparison. I would say. So that coordinator would be like the Scrum Master person, whereas the people that actually do the work and collaborate with each other, they would be the dev team in this example. Absolutely, I can see that. That's a good way of looking at it. Awesome. Thank you very much, Arun. Kim, we'll go over to you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's good to know how I feel. Like, yeah, it's good. Some good stuff to follow. Have like a plan. So it's yeah, nothing more to say.
I got you. I got you. No, it is. I mean, and again, there's a lot of things, and it all comes with practice, right? And one thing that, you know, what drives us often when we are working with this thing is we want to build things, right? We want to build good things, not only the thing, you know, some simple software. I can understand in the beginning, you know, when syntax is the overwhelming part, but once you know that, again, I've given this example before. Your ability to speak English doesn't make you a Shakespeare, right? So it's the same thing. Your ability to code doesn't mean that you can build fantastic software. You rarely build amazing software on your own. There are exceptions, of course, but for the most part, you want to build things together with others, and that's when the magic happens. And Agile, in its core, is about that magic. You want to make sure that you do the right thing at the right time, and that it proves to be amazing, and also a good experience doing that, like where the road is more important than the goal itself, which is BS, to be honest. But you know, you want to get a good experience. And I would say, and as I said before, I've been there. I've been working with people that are dedicated, motivated, and focused, and together we can do a lot of things. And once you have experienced that feeling a few times, then you kind of get addicted to it, you know, and you want to experience that again. And that's when you kind of just push. How can we tweak? What can we do better so that you can, you know, reach that hyper productivity, and so on. And Lucas, my wingman, what say you?
What say I? No, it's it's a lot of, you know, new principles and then new words and theories, especially at this point of the bootcamp. But I think it's a good thing to kind of keep in the back of your head, and many things will become, you know, more clear also later on. You'll start practicing some of these things, like the design phases and continuous integration and these things. So it's going to become more and more clear. So more, you know, just open your mind to the whole thing, because I think one thing that spoke to me about the whole Agile thing is kind of like, you know, what am I doing, or why am I doing this? Coding, for example. Like, I want to, you know, get out there and talk to clients and create something better than what it was before. Like, I want to go and create value, and that feels like that's exactly what this whole Agile thing is around. As you know, Thomas said, it's about being creative, and I think from that's where you create, you know, kind of actual value, create something better than it was before. So No, I like Agile too. I mean, I don't have any practice with it yet, but I can definitely, I can see the point of it, and look forward to as well, practice it out there in the real world.
And I think that one thing that me and Lucas and Luke actually was involved in running a few technical experiments, right? Because, and I want to touch upon this, because a lot of the things that we do is like tech, get this data, code this, and so on, right? And it's so easy to get caught up with all the shit that's happening, like, oh, it doesn't work, I don't know how to do this. And so you have to read a lot of documentation. You have to focus on the technical stuff, of course, right? That goes without saying, because we use technology to achieve something. But the thing is that if you don't lose sight of what it is you are achieving and why, then it can actually become very creative, because you go like, we had these discussions, Lucas and Luke, in a session the other day, like, imagine if we could do this, imagine this, and you start imagining things that you can achieve with technology, and then all of a sudden the technology just becomes, it takes the back seat, right? It's the like the dreams or the possibilities that becomes front and center. And I like that. That's the creative part, in my opinion, and that's what makes it fun. Those sessions that I actually remember are the ones that are not necessarily so productive, that we solve a lot of things, which of course is the ultimate goal, but like imagine if you can imagine something and then make it happen, right? So you create something out of thin air, out of a thought or two. Or let's say that one guy says, oh, imagine this, and then the other says, and then this, and then this, and then that imagination becomes like a product or of 3 or 4 or 5 people, and and it grows on you, and then all of a sudden, and then you can make it happen by joint efforts, right? That's the best part. And I just gonna say that I remember when I was new at all of this, and I felt a bit inferior to say, oh, I work with these very seasoned developers and so on, what can I bring to the table? And I remember a session, an online session actually, where it was like people were thinking about something, how we could do stuff, and I had an idea, but I was too junior, I didn't really want to say anything, and one of the guys were, because they just couldn't come up with a solution, and they asked me, hey, by the way, Thomas, what are your thoughts? And I said, perhaps this and that, and they go like, oh, that's fucking splendid, and they actually worked on that, they tweaked that idea a little bit, and then we made it happen jointly, and they pinged over the code to me, and it was actually the first time I was practicing Git ponging and so on, and I got to write some code, and in just a day or two I saw my code in production, and it was like my first collaborative open source contribution. It was really great, and the only reason why this happened is because they asked. Do you understand? They were proactive. Like, I wasn't just a anonymous bystander. In their eyes, I was like, okay, one of the team, so my voice should be heard as well, and which is an agile principle in itself, and that led to me actually contributing, right? And that was an ego boost for me, of course, and it taught me that everybody's opinions matters, right? And that we can achieve something if we just collaborate in one way or another. Anyway, I can go on forever. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that the people in the chat also at least got something out of this. And Anya, thank you very much for rating my channel. That's my first, I guess, or second perhaps, but that's always awesome. Again, I think that this way of building software is the best way. I think that that has come across in my talk. Robotic Raisin, thank you very much for watching. I'll be doing a session, hopefully together with Anya, about automated testing, both unit testing and acceptance test or end-to-end testing in JavaScript, which is again an XP practice. So stay tuned for that. That will happen in a day or two or something. Anyway, thank you very much, guys.
Cheers,
Stay
Thomas.
safe. Stay safe. Remember. All right.
See ya.
Cheerios.
Cheerio,
Bye-bye.
people. Ciao.
Ciao.
Have good fun.
And to my streaming guests, thank you very much for tuning in. I talk to you. Cheers. And thank you for saying that it was a good quote. MNGT. Which one? What quote was that? I'm saying so many things. Do you remember? You said a great quote. Let's see if we can get that. Not really? Oh, okay. Next time, perhaps. Talk to you. Cheers.